Introduction to the Dawnlight. Captain Arlen leaned back in his chair, gazing at the vast expanse of stars twinkling against the backdrop of space. It had been an excruciatingly dull month aboard the Dawnlight, an AMIA science vessel designed for exploration and research. The ship was sleek and modern, its design reminiscent of a hawk gliding through the skies of their home planet. Yet here they were, parked in orbit around a barren rock, waiting for a team of geologists who seemed more interested in digging through dirt than exploring the cosmos. "Captain," called Keed, his first mate, breaking through Arlen's reverie. "All equipment pods are stowed. We're ready to leave this rock behind." Finally, Arlen sighed, a sense of relief washing over him. Plot a course out of this system. Ked's fingers danced over his console as he inputted commands into the ship's navigation system. "How far out do you want to be before we engage FTL?" "Let's not rush it," Arlen replied, recalling the safety protocols drilled into him during training. "Get us to an optimal safe distance." The Dawnlight was equipped with state-of-the-art sublight and FTL engines, but even with such advanced technology, caution was paramount. As Ked adjusted their trajectory, Arlen felt a familiar thrill coursing through him, the excitement of leaving behind the mundane and venturing into the unknown. "Optimal course puts us in position for FTL in 6 hours, Ked announced. 6 hours? Not bad, Ked replied with a grin. "I knew there was a reason I signed on to this ship." Arlen chuckled softly at that remark. The crew had grown close over their month together, sharing stories and laughter amid the monotony of waiting for scientific data that never seemed to come. As they began their slow ascent out of orbit, Arlen allowed himself to dream about what lay ahead, new worlds to explore, discoveries waiting just beyond their reach. But those thoughts were abruptly interrupted by Ked's voice again. "Captain, you might want to take a look at this," Ked said cautiously. "What is it?" "I'm picking up another ship on scanners," Ked replied, his tone shifting from lightheartedness to concern. Arlen's heart raced as he moved closer to Ked's console. "Where is it?" 3.2 light-minutes away, near that gas giant," Ked said, pointing at the display screen where another blip flickered ominously against their navigational map. Arlen frowned. It was unusual for another vessel to be in this remote area of space. "Can we identify it?" Ked shook his head as he adjusted settings on his scanner. "I'm not sure yet, but it doesn't look like any AMIA ship I've seen." Arlen felt an uneasy knot form in his stomach. They were far from any major settlements. What could another ship possibly want here? He toggled his intercom button and summoned the safety officer to the bridge. "Safety officer to the bridge immediately," he commanded. The door swished open moments later as Kumos entered, looking slightly disheveled from his previous duties in engineering. "What's going on? You wouldn't believe how much equipment I still have to process through quarantine." "Take a look at this," Arlen said urgently, gesturing toward Ked's console. Kumos stepped forward and scrutinized the readings on screen. His feathers bristled as he processed what he saw. "That's definitely an emergency," he confirmed. Arlen nodded gravely. "We need to be cautious." Despite being technologically advanced and proud of their diplomatic prowess, AMIA had learned from experience that not every encounter in space ended peacefully. As they continued scanning for more information about the unknown vessel, Kumos offered suggestions on how best to prepare for potential conflict. "Keep our distance," Kumos advised quietly but firmly. "If they want to know what we're doing here, we can tell them. But don't let them get close enough to put this ship in danger." Arlen agreed but couldn't shake off his growing unease about this encounter. He turned back toward Ked and ordered him to prepare communication frequencies used by humans, if that was indeed what they were dealing with. After several tense moments filled only by beeping consoles and anxious glances exchanged among crew members, Keed finally announced he had everything ready for transmission. "This is Captain Arlen of the AMIA Science Consortium Starship Dawnlight, calling unidentified human vessel." He spoke into the comm system with authority despite his racing heart. "We have been conducting scientific research on the third planet and are now leaving your system. Please identify yourself." Silence followed his announcement, a silence that felt heavy with tension as they awaited any response from the approaching ship. After several agonizing moments passed without reply, Arlen tried again. "This is Captain Arlen Calling." Still nothing. Kidd frowned as he monitored their scanners closely. It was clear that whatever was out there wasn't responding, or perhaps didn't intend to communicate at all. "We need to keep moving," Kumos urged quietly, as if sensing Arlen's growing frustration. Just then, another alert blared from Kidd's console. "Captain, they're accelerating toward us." Arlen's heart sank further into his chest as dread washed over him like ice water. "Increase our speed. Get us out of here." As Kidd scrambled to comply with orders while adjusting their trajectory once more, panic settled into every corner of Arlen's mind. They were now being pursued by an unknown entity in one of space's most unforgiving environments, the vastness where anything could happen without warning or mercy. The crew worked feverishly at their stations while glancing nervously at each other. Uncertainty loomed large over them, like dark clouds gathering before a storm. "Helm, increase speed," Arlen shouted again as he felt desperation clawing at him from within. But deep down inside him lingered an unsettling thought. What if this wasn't just another passing ship? What if it was something far worse? As they prepared for whatever lay ahead, be it negotiation or confrontation, the Dawnlight drifted further away from its previous orbit around that desolate rock. Its crew would soon discover just how perilous space could truly be when faced with those who did not share their ideals or values. First contact. The tension aboard the Dawnlight was palpable as Captain Arlen and his crew braced themselves for the unknown. The approaching human ship loomed on their scanners, a shadow against the backdrop of stars. Arlen's mind raced with possibilities, each more alarming than the last. He had read about human encounters before, stories of aggression and territorial disputes, but he had hoped that they would be spared such an encounter. "Captain, I'm refining the scans," Kidd announced, his fingers flying over the console. "I'll try to get a clearer picture of their vessel." "Make it quick," Arlen replied, his voice steady despite the anxiety gnawing at him. "We need to know what we're dealing with." Kidd's brow furrowed as he adjusted the settings. "I'm not sure what to expect, but I've never seen a ship like this before. It's different." "Different how?" Kumos asked, his feathers ruffled in agitation. "It has a sleek design but lacks the usual markings we expect from a military vessel," Kidd explained. "It could be civilian or something else entirely." Arlen nodded, trying to remain calm. "Keep monitoring their approach. We need to be prepared for anything." As the minutes ticked by, the crew worked in silence, each lost in their thoughts about what might happen next. Arlen had always prided himself on being a diplomat at heart, believing that communication could bridge even the widest chasms of misunderstanding. But as he stared at the blip on the scanner drawing closer, he couldn't shake off the feeling that diplomacy might not be enough this time. "Captain," Kidd said suddenly, breaking through Arlen's thoughts. "I've got something." "What is it?" Arlen asked, leaning closer to the console. "It's a signal," Kidd replied, excitement lacing his voice. "They're broadcasting on a frequency we can understand." "Put it through," Arlen commanded. The bridge fell silent as Kidd activated the communication link. A crackling voice filled the air, leaden with urgency and static. "This is Captain Morgan of the human ship Vanguard. We have detected your presence and are requesting identification." Arlen felt a rush of relief mixed with apprehension. "This is Captain Arlen of the AMIA science vessel Dawnlight. We are conducting scientific research in this system, and we're just preparing to leave." There was a brief pause before Morgan responded. "We've been monitoring your activities for some time. Your presence here raises concerns regarding our territorial boundaries." "Territorial boundaries?" Arlen echoed, taken aback. "We were unaware of any claims in this area. The humans have been surveying this region for potential resource extraction," Morgan explained tersely. "Your ship's activities could interfere with our operations." Arlen sensed an underlying tension in Morgan's voice. "We mean no harm. Our mission is purely scientific. Science can often lead to exploitation." Morgan interrupted sharply. "We cannot allow that to happen without oversight." Kumos leaned closer to Arlen and whispered, "This doesn't sound good, Captain." "Let's keep our cool," Arlen replied quietly, trying to maintain an air of diplomacy even as his heart raced. "Captain Morgan," he said firmly, "we're simply here to gather data and conduct research. We have no intention of infringing upon your operations or resources." Another pause followed before Morgan replied, his tone slightly softer but still guarded. "Then you will understand why we need to assess your ship and its capabilities before you proceed any further." Arlen swallowed hard but maintained his composure. "I understand your concerns, but I assure you that we are not equipped for combat or conflict. We are explorers, not conquerors." "Explorers?" Morgan scoffed lightly. "That sounds noble enough until you realize how often explorers become invaders." Arlen felt frustration bubbling beneath his calm exterior, but reminded himself that escalating tensions would lead nowhere beneficial. "I propose we establish a temporary truce while we sort this out," he suggested carefully. Morgan hesitated before responding. "A truce? What do you suggest?" "We can share our data with you, show you our findings and intentions," Arlen offered earnestly. "If you allow us safe passage out of this system, we will leave without further incident." The silence stretched on as both sides weighed their options. Finally, Morgan spoke again, albeit reluctantly. "Very well, Captain Arlen. I will allow you to transmit your data under one condition. You must remain within visual range while we assess your information." Arlen nodded slowly. It was a small price to pay for safety, but still felt like a gamble in uncertain waters. "Understood," he replied evenly. As Ked began preparing the data transmission, Kumos leaned in closer once more, concern etched across his features. "What if they don't like what they see?" he murmured. "They'll have no reason to attack if they see we're harmless," Arlen reassured him, though doubt lingered in his mind. The transmission commenced, a steady stream of data flowing from the Dawnlight to the Vanguard. As they waited for Morgan's evaluation, tension hung thick in the air like fog enveloping a distant shore. Minutes passed agonizingly slowly until finally Morgan's voice crackled through again. "Your findings seem legitimate enough, but I need more time to analyze them thoroughly." "I understand," Arlen replied cautiously. "However," Morgan continued hesitantly, "we cannot ignore our protocols entirely." "What do you mean?" Arlen asked warily. "I'm sending over a boarding party for further inspection of your vessel," Morgan stated flatly. "What?" Kumos exclaimed incredulously. Arlen raised a hand to quiet him before addressing Morgan again. "You can't be serious. We've already shared our data. There's no need for boarding. It's standard procedure when encountering unknown vessels in disputed territories," Morgan insisted without remorse. "But this is unnecessary. You have no reason." "I have every reason." Morgan snapped back sharply before taking a breath to regain composure. "We'll send over 2 crew members shortly." As soon as the transmission ended, Kumos turned towards Arlen with wide eyes, filled with disbelief and fear. "This is bad. They're going to board us." "I know," Arlen replied grimly as he glanced at Ked, who was still focused on his console screen displaying their current situation. "We need to prepare for potential conflict." Ked nodded solemnly while adjusting various settings on his console. There was little time left before they would arrive aboard their ship. "We should secure sensitive areas, lock down labs and armories just in case," Kumos suggested urgently. Arlen agreed and quickly relayed orders throughout the ship via intercom. "All crew members are instructed to secure sensitive areas immediately. Prepare for possible boarding." The crew sprang into action. Adrenaline surged through them as they moved swiftly yet cautiously throughout their home, the Dawnlight, transforming from explorers into defenders within moments' notice. As they awaited their visitors from the Vanguard, uncertainty gripped them all tightly like an iron vice. a reminder that even among stars filled with wonder lay dangers lurking just beyond sight. The attack. The atmosphere on the Dawnlight shifted dramatically as the crew braced for the impending confrontation. Captain Arlen felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on him, each heartbeat echoing in his ears. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife, and every crew member was acutely aware of the stakes at hand. Status report. Arlen barked, his voice steady despite the chaos swirling around him. Ked, his first mate, was glued to his console, eyes darting between redouts. The human ship is closing in fast, Captain. They're maintaining a direct intercept course. What about that drone? Arlen asked, his mind racing through potential scenarios. It's still on our tail, Ked replied grimly. We can't outrun it. Arlen's heart sank. Then we need to prepare for impact. Helm. Take evasive maneuvers. The ship lurched as Anno, the helmsman, executed a sharp turn. The inertial dampeners kicked in, but the crew still felt a jolt as the Dawnlight responded to the sudden change in direction. Captain Humos, the safety officer, shouted from his station. We've got to secure all sensitive areas. If they board us, do it. Arlen interrupted, urgency creeping into his tone. We can't let them gain access to our labs or equipment. As Kumos relayed orders over the intercom, Arlen felt a surge of adrenaline coursing through him. He had trained for emergencies like this, yet nothing could truly prepare one for the reality of being hunted in space. Captain, Ked said urgently, the human ship is launching something else. Another drone. Brace for impact. Arlen shouted just as the bridge shook violently. The drone collided with their hull, sending vibrations throughout the ship. What was that? Anno exclaimed, struggling to maintain control. Damage report, Arlen demanded. Ked's fingers flew over his console as he assessed the situation. Sublight engines are offline. We're dead in the water. Panic rippled through the crew as they processed this grim news. Without their engines, they were sitting ducks. Can we at least send out a distress signal? Kumos asked desperately. I'm trying. Ked replied, frustration evident in his voice. But we need power for that. Arlen's mind raced as he considered their options. We have to get those engines back online. Keon, can you do anything from engineering? Over the intercom came Keon's voice, strained and hurried. I'm working on it, but we've sustained serious damage. I can reroute some power from non-essential systems to get us moving again. Just give me a few minutes. Do it, Arlen ordered. We need to buy time until we can jump to FTL. Another tremor rocked the ship as another drone struck their hull with explosive force. Alarms blared throughout the Dawnlight, and crew members scrambled to regain their footing. Captain, Ked shouted above the din. The human ship is hailing us. Put it through, Arlen commanded. The bridge fell silent as Morgan's voice crackled over the intercom once more, this time laced with an edge of menace. You are trespassing in our territory. Stand down and prepare for boarding. Arlen clenched his fists at his sides. This is Captain Arlen of the Dawnlight. We're not here to cause trouble. We have no hostile intentions. Your presence is a threat, Morgan replied coldly. You will comply or face consequences. Before Arlen could respond, another explosion rocked the ship, this time from within their own systems. Engineering, Keon shouted over the chaos. We've lost power to several decks. I can't guarantee containment. Seal off affected areas, Arlen ordered urgently. We can't let them breach our core systems. As crew members scrambled to follow orders, Arlen felt a sense of despair creeping in. They were outmatched and outgunned by an enemy who seemed intent on asserting dominance rather than seeking understanding. We need that distress signal sent now, Kumos urged again. I'm working on it. Ked snapped back as he fought against flickering screens and warning lights flashing across his console. Arlen took a deep breath, forcing himself to think clearly amid the chaos. They needed an escape plan, something that would buy them precious time while they regrouped and assessed their options. "Kid," he said slowly, "can you initiate a low-power FTL burst? Just enough to create a disturbance." Ked looked up from his console, eyes wide with realization. That could work. It might confuse them long enough for us to make our escape. "Do it," Arlen ordered firmly. As Ked worked furiously at his console, another drone struck their hull with devastating force. A series of explosions echoed through the corridors of the Dawnlight. "We're losing structural integrity," Kumos shouted over the alarms blaring around them. Arlen felt panic rise within him, but pushed it down hard. They couldn't afford fear now, not when lives were at stake. "Keon, how much longer?" he called into the intercom. "I'm almost there," Keon replied breathlessly. "Just hold tight." With every passing second feeling like an eternity, Arlen glanced at Ked's console where readouts flickered erratically under stress. "Ready when you are," Ked said finally, determination etched on his face despite their dire situation. "On 3, Arlen instructed. 1, 2, 3. Ked slammed down on a button and activated their low-power FTL drive. The ship shuddered violently as energy surged through its systems. A ripple of distortion spread out into space like a shockwave. For a moment, nothing happened. But then an explosion erupted from behind them, as if they had triggered a chain reaction among their attackers' drones. "What was that?" Ano exclaimed incredulously as he struggled to keep control of their craft amidst all this chaos. "It worked," Ked shouted triumphantly as he monitored their scanners closely. The human ships seemed momentarily disoriented by what had just occurred. They hesitated, giving Arlen just enough time to formulate another plan. "Helm, get us moving again, any direction away from here," he commanded fiercely. Ano nodded and pushed forward on his controls. Slowly but surely they began gaining momentum despite significant damage still plaguing them from earlier encounters. As they accelerated away from danger, a flicker of hope ignited within him. Arlen knew this wasn't over yet, not by a long shot, but at least they had bought themselves some breathing room. For now. While navigating through treacherous territory filled with uncertainty ahead lay new challenges waiting just beyond sight. Challenges that would test both courage and resolve like never before. Desperate measures. The Dawnlight trembled under the strain of its damaged systems, and Captain Arlen felt the weight of impending doom pressing heavily on his shoulders. The ship's alarms blared incessantly, a cacophony of warnings that underscored the gravity of their situation. They had managed to send out a distress signal, but the vastness of space was unforgiving, and time was slipping away. "Captain," Ked shouted from his console, his voice strained with urgency. "The human ship is closing in fast. We have less than 5 minutes before they reach us." Arlen's mind raced as he weighed their options. "Keon, how's the power rerouting coming along?" "Not great," Keon replied over the intercom, his voice crackling with static. "I'm trying to stabilize the power grid, but we've lost several conduits. It's going to take time we don't have." "Do what you can," Arlen urged, determination flooding his veins. "We need that FTL drive operational. Now." As he turned back to Cade, he noticed the fear etched on his first mate's face. "What if they board us?" Ked asked, dread lacing his words. "We won't let that happen," Arlen replied firmly. "We'll hold them off if it comes to that." Kumos, the safety officer, stepped forward, his feathers ruffled in agitation. "Captain, we should consider arming ourselves. If they breach our defenses." "No," Arlen interrupted sharply. "We're not looking for a fight. We need to focus on getting out of here." Ked nodded in agreement but couldn't hide his anxiety. "I just hope they don't see us as a threat." The tension in the bridge was palpable as they awaited their fate. Every second felt like an eternity as the human ship loomed closer on their scanners. "Captain," Otto called from the helm. "The drone is still active and seems to be preparing for another attack." "Can we disable it?" Arlen asked. "I can try to jam its signals," Anna replied, fingers flying over his controls. But it might not work. Those drones are designed to be resilient. Do it anyway, Arlen commanded. As Anna worked furiously at his station, Ked monitored their scanners closely. They're launching another drone, he shouted. Arlen's heart raced as he prepared for impact once more. Brace for impact, he yelled. The bridge shook violently as the new drone collided with their hull, sending crew members sprawling against consoles and walls. Alarms blared louder than ever as sparks flew from damaged equipment. Status report, Arlen barked as he regained his footing. Damage report, hull integrity compromised. Ked shouted back, panic creeping into his voice. We're losing atmosphere in Section 3. Seal off that section, Kumos ordered, rushing to secure emergency protocols. Arlen felt a surge of frustration. They were running out of time and options. He needed a miracle, a way to escape this nightmare before it consumed them entirely. Keon, how long until you can get that FTL drive online? Arlen demanded through gritted teeth. I'm almost there. Just a few more minutes, Keon replied desperately. As the crew scrambled to contain the damage and prepare for potential boarding, Arlen felt a sense of resolve wash over him. They had come too far to give up now. Everyone, listen up, Arlen called out, raising his voice above the chaos. We're going to make it out of this. I need everyone focused and ready for anything. Ked nodded, determination setting into his features. We'll hold them off if they come aboard. Exactly, Arlen affirmed. We're not going down without a fight. Suddenly, an alert blared from Ked's console. Captain, the human ship is hailing us again. Put it through, Arlen commanded, bracing himself for what was to come. Morgan's voice crackled over the intercom once more, filled with authority and menace. This is your final warning. Stand down immediately or face consequences. Arlen clenched his fists at his sides. We will not stand down. We are not your enemies. You are trespassing in our territory. You have 1 minute to comply before we take action, Morgan retorted coldly. Arlen felt a surge of anger rise within him. How could they be so blind? You're making a mistake. We're simply explorers. Before he could finish, another explosion rocked the Dawnlight, sending crew members tumbling once again. Damage report, Arlen shouted as he steadied himself against a console. The engines are failing completely, Ked cried out in despair. We're losing power rapidly. Arlen's mind raced. They had mere moments left before they would be overwhelmed by the human ship's aggression. Keon, is there any way you can get that FTL drive online now? He pleaded urgently. I can try forcing it online, Keon replied hesitantly, but it could cause catastrophic failure. It's better than waiting here to be boarded, Arlen insisted. With no other options left on the table, Keon took a deep breath and began rerouting power once more, this time risking everything in hopes of saving them all. As seconds ticked away painfully slowly on the bridge, tension mounted like a coiled spring ready to snap at any moment. Finally, Keon's voice came through again. I've got it. The drive is online. But we need to jump now. Arlen wasted no time. He turned to Auno at the helm and shouted, Engage FTL, now. With a swift motion, Auno activated the controls. Energy surged through the ship as they prepared for their jump into FTL space. The Dawnlight shuddered violently one last time as they engaged their engines. Then everything went dark. The familiar sensation of being pulled through space enveloped them all at once like an embrace from an old friend. For an instant, silence reigned supreme aboard their vessel. A brief reprieve from chaos before reality set back in with full force as alarms blared once more around them, signaling damage sustained during their hasty escape attempt. As lights flickered back on across various consoles throughout the bridge, crew members exchanged glances filled with relief, mixed with lingering uncertainty about what lay ahead now that they were free. Or were they? Status report, Arlen demanded once more as adrenaline coursed through him like wildfire, igniting every nerve ending alive again after being held captive by fear moments earlier. Kidd checked readings on his console before answering. "We've made it out of their range, but we've sustained heavy damage." "What about our distress signal?" Kumos asked anxiously. "We should still be transmitting," Kidd confirmed after checking again quickly before continuing. "But I don't know how long it'll last given our current state." Arlen nodded grimly. Every second counted now. They needed help fast if they were going to survive this ordeal unscathed, or at least with some semblance of normalcy intact afterward. "Helm, plot a course toward the nearest Amia settlement," he ordered decisively while keeping one eye trained on incoming data streams from various systems, still struggling against instability caused by previous encounters endured during this harrowing journey thus far. Ano nodded and began working diligently at his station, while murmurs spread throughout other crew members, reflecting both relief mixed with apprehension about what awaited them next. As they sailed through uncharted territory filled with uncertainty ahead, Captain Arlen couldn't shake off feeling that this wasn't truly over yet, not by any means, and whatever awaited them next would test both courage and resolve like never before.